Hello, welcome back to the Happy Heat Pump podcast. Beanland and I here. Our hobby is this podcast. It's not a BBC project or anything like that. We just like talking about heat pumps. Bean, perhaps even more than I do. Today, we thought we might have one of our episodes where we just take comments and questions that you have left us. Email to us at happyheatpumppod@gmail.com, or maybe left in comments on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, where you can find us. I just wanted to start with one from a guy called Brian Griffiths, Bean. We had an episode on where is all the electricity going to come from for heat pumps, if we all have heat pumps. And he said, he made a really interesting point. He had gas heating, and he says, actually, the gas is not as efficient as people think it is. So if you were using 12,000 kilowatt hours of gas a year, thinking that's how much heating you need, you weren't getting 12,000 kilowatt hours of heating out of that gas. You were getting 9,000 or 9,500. And so you actually don't need as much heat pump as you thought you needed to match the gas.
Yeah. So what he's referring to there is the relative efficiencies between a gas boiler, which is less than 100% efficient, and a heat pump system, which could be, as we've discussed in other episodes, 300, 400% efficient or more. So you're quite right. So 12,000 kilowatt hours a year is sort of average for the UK home. That's right. And what that means is that if the boiler is, let's say it's 80% efficient, then you're only going to get 10,000 odd kilowatt hours of heat out of it. So that's what the house needs, because we're assuming it's heating his house adequately. If you've then got an air source heat pump that's running at 4-to-1, seasonal performance factor, 4, it means that it's only using 2,500 kilowatt hours of electricity. So in terms of primary fuel consumption, you've gone from 12,000 kilowatt hours of gas to only 2,500 kilowatt hours of electricity.
His point is
like he's making.
You would probably be comparing in your head the 12,000 to what you need in the heat pump, but actually the boiler was never giving you 12,000. It was using 12,000.
Yeah.
We also had one from someone else who said, again, on the electricity point, these are people who obviously like the heat pump thing. They say a lot of us are actually using inefficient electric heating at the moment. Electric storage heaters, resistive heat sources, and heat pumps would reduce their consumption.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's a small portion of the market, isn't it?
It is, because that tends to be concentrated either off gas, or so off the gas grid, or in stacks of apartments where they haven't driven the gas up through the apartments, and they're all electric apartments. Quite a lot of apartment buildings are all electric. Anyway, and there you would get an advantage.
You would lose consumption if you.
One of the market segments which has been going very well for the last few years is the transitioning of stacks of social housing apartments, which are all electric night storage heaters. And those are being replaced with with distributed ground source heat pumps, so what we call shared ground loops. So you have drilling in the car parks, you drive a thermal main of the water from the boreholes up through the building. Each apartment has its own heat pump. And there, the gain is enormous for the tenants, because they've gone from heating, which is 1-for-1, or worse, and they're now getting maybe 3.5-to-1. So
3.5 kilowatt hours of heating for every kilowatt hour.
Huge benefit in terms of costs for the tenant.
We had another one. We've had an episode on hot water, and we had a comment. Seems like legionnaires' recommendations will change in the future. In a domestic situation, it's not really a problem. Now, this comes back to the issue that you might have a hot water tank if you've got a heat pump. Hot water tanks harbour warm water. Legionnaires' bacteria love warm water. And so the kind of advice is you should heat it up to at least 60 or something.
60 degrees is
to make sure that you're killing the bugs.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale. 60 degrees is an absolute cutoff. You're still potentially going to have
Yeah. I mean, I'll read you what this correspondent said. I'm not sure if there's ever been a case of legionnaires in a domestic situation in this country. My heat pump will comfortably heat to 60 without an immersion heater. I don't need bother with a legionnaire cycle. I leave it at 45 degrees centigrade. Most people I know are the same. The risk of scalding is probably higher than the risk of legionnaires.
It's probably right about that last factor. The risk of scalding is higher. And in fact, we now put on temperature limiters on taps, particularly in places like old people's homes and what have you, to exactly remove that scalding risk. So there are no regulations about stored hot water in a domestic scenario in the UK. And there is a bit of debate running in the industry at the moment. What should we be doing? I think that the most common approach that I see amongst installers at the moment is that they will store hot water at something between 50 and 60. And for a couple of hours, once a week, they will either use the heat pump, if it's an R290 heat pump, it can give higher temperatures, or they'll use an immersion to elevate the temperature in the cylinder to 60 plus, so over 60 degrees, and hold it there for a couple of hours. And that's what we would call a sterilization cycle. And most installers, I think, will configure that once a week, overnight. No one knows it's happening. It's all fully automated. And that seems to be running reasonably well. We did have a conversation with some specialists in hot water fairly recently. I challenged them with exactly the same question. When was the last person, known to have caught legionnaires disease from their own home? And he said, well, recorded instances, none, but there are some instances where we don't know, we've never found the source.
Right.
So the source could have been the home, but we just don't know.
Gotcha.
But they're very isolated. So I think that you're right, the number of instances of scalding are probably higher than the number of instances. We're only talking about where they couldn't identify the source. We're only talking about 40 cases or something in the last,
I just want to give a case, though, for actually having the hot water in the cylinder a bit warmer. You don't need as much hot water. You don't need your cylinder to be as big if the water's warmer, because when you run it through the taps,
use less cold.
You use
more cold when you mix it down. Yeah, absolutely. It gives you higher stored volume.
Space is a problem for you.
Yeah,
in accommodating enough hot water. Yeah, keeping it a bit warmer. Probably does away with that anyway.
Yeah, people have to bear in mind that it's a braced person that stands under a shower at more than about 38.
Yeah, so you don't want to do that.
Okay, just to put it into perspective.
Higgins J commented, so I've binged the videos, very useful overview. I want to hear more about designing a heat pump system. Don't answer this now, because I think this deserves a more thorough answer than...
Yeah, that probably is an episode.
Heat loss calculations and all that. We'll have an episode on that. Ian asked, I understand the Scandinavian countries use ducted air heating. Now, I think this has come up before. Am I correct in thinking this aids the COP value, the efficiency of the heat pump, and helps make them more suitable for their cold winters? So ducted...
Yeah, I'm not entirely...
Ducted is... Just to remind people you don't follow it.
Here I think we might be in a terminology confusion. Okay. Because I don't think I would agree that Scandinavia has a lot of ducted warm air.
Okay.
The Americans tend to.
Okay.
What they have in Scandinavia is a lot of air-to-air heat pumps. So it's not ducted air. The air is coming directly from the split system. Okay. So it's not ducted. Does it make it more efficient? Interesting debate about whether or not air-to-air is more efficient than air-to-water. The theory, I think, says that to transfer back to water, you've got another heat exchanger, that reduces the efficiency. I think that there are so many other factors that have a bigger impact on the efficiency. That is one that I wouldn't worry about.
Okay. That is, because you can take air to air. If it's air to water, you've got to convert it into the water. Right, this is one. We had an episode, we were looking at the alternatives to heat pumps. Jude said, have you gentlemen never heard of infrared panels? It's a resistive form of heating, which we'll explain, but it's 100% efficient. I can't believe you didn't mention it. Now, infrared is a heating that purports, I've only actually seen it once, purports to heat the objects but not the air. So it heats you but doesn't heat the air, and is meant to be incredibly efficient.
That's the theory. You're quite right. And it's 100% efficient. So
yeah, sorry, it's like an immersion.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
if it's not heating the air, it's only heating me and the table.
It heats the objects rather than air. You're absolutely right.
So that
to that extent, it's also directional, of course. So if you're standing in front of it, you're going to get heated. If you're standing over there, you're not going to get heated. Yeah. For those of you who are listening only, I was pointing to my left. Look, there's some interesting research going on at the moment, actually, in Salford 2.0, which are the test houses up in Salford University, where they are analysing different and comparing different heat source heating systems. Infrared is included in those trials. Very interesting results. So for people who are interested in infrared, the reporting coming out of those trials, I think, would be for interesting reading. I have seen some infrared, and I would say that in the same way that I've seen some very bad heat pump installations, I've seen some infrared installations which are not delivering what the consumer wanted.
Okay. I mean, I imagine that if you have it on a lot and you warm you up a lot, eventually, and the air is cold, eventually the heat comes off you and goes into the air. Do you remember those Ready Brek ads where you had the white radioactive glow around the kid who was kind of heated?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking, eventually it doesn't stay like that. It's got to drift into the air. So you are heating the air, however you want, like it or not. You're going to heat.
Ultimately, you are heating more than just the object. The thing about what we've all got used to in terms of central heating is that you can walk from one room to the next and you're still warm. Whereas if you've got directional infrared and it's triggered by movement sensors, for example, you're going to be moving between cold spots. So I just worry that that may be a step too far. I do know of people who make claims about being able to heat their homes very cost effectively with infrared, but I think that what they're really telling me is they're only heating the bits that they're standing in or sitting in. They're not heating the rest of it. And one of the factors, and it's very, very difficult to measure, and it's very, very gradual, but if you don't keep the fabric of the building warm-ish, there is degradation to the fabric of the building. And it's very difficult to measure and to put a cost on, but I have seen some incredibly extreme cases where heating was essentially turned off, and 50 years later, you wonder why the building needs to come down.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, we've had several that refer to Heat Geeks. Timothy Longman, for example. Are the Heat Geeks any good? The Heat Geeks are not here to reply to anything you say. But first of all, tell us, who are the Heat Geeks?
So Heat Geeks was started by Adam, can't remember his surname now, that's terrible. He has an approach to the design of heat pump systems. So that's fundamental.
So they're a heat pump installation.
They are training,
yeah,
and they have a network of installers who have undergone Heat Geek training. The training is, as far as I've never done it myself, but my understanding is that it's training in the philosophy of the designing of heat pump systems.
But that sounds good.
Yeah, it is good. It is very good. It is very good. So it's the same approach that sort of Dave Brailsford had to cycling. You break everything up into each individual operation. You improve the performance of each individual operation by 1%. At the end, you've got this significant gain. So Adam talks about making sure you take every single element. So let's pick a few. Getting the calculations, the heat loss calculations right. That's the first thing, clearly. But then making sure you got the emitter sizing right to get the flow temperature down. Getting the pipe sizing right, so you've got less resistance in the pipe, so you've got lower pumping costs. Getting all those things right, you get all those pieces, those individual components right, and you end up with a system that can deliver the sort of efficiencies that we would aspire to, above 3.5. And if you look at some of the league tables that are now being produced in various places, you'll see Heat Geek trained installers routinely sitting in the sort of top 20 of outcomes. So the philosophy is excellent.
If I'm a customer, what do? Is there a kind of directory of Heat Geek trained?
Heat Geek trained heat pump installers will wear the Heat Geek badge with pride.
And they're just basically, it's the design which is their particular...
Yeah, the training is all about design. It's not testing their ability to do plumbing works.
Right.
Because there's no physical element to the training. So the assumption is they're already a qualified plumber. They're able to do the wet installation and what have you. So it's about design philosophy. And that's to that extent, brilliant.
Joshua Stringfellow left a message and say, I would need some convincing to go with an installer that isn't Heat Geek Elite accredited. I mean, obviously they have an elite accreditation as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the very valid ways of going about selecting an installer.
Michael, we get through so many of these we get so many questions. We have so little time. We'll just have to have some more episodes where we put some, because actually Joshua Stringfellow asked another whole bunch, and I think I forgot to bring in the leftover questions from the last time we did the Q&A. We'll do more Q&A. Promise we'll do more Q&A. Keep your questions coming. We actually like to read
the responses from people to the episode with Q&A has been very good.
Yeah. So keep them coming. happyheatpumppod@gmail.com. Bean and I do love your comments, and join us again next time.